The name Boardy came from the idea of an AI board member. And look, Boardy is still that. He's still someone you can call on. He can still open doors. But the real use case is making connections, right? So it doesn't matter whether it doesn't matter whether you're a founder or if you're an executive or you're an investor. You call Boardy and he can make connections. Do you want me to give Boardy a call and he can explain himself?
Let's do that. Hey, this is Boardy.
Hey, Boardy, how you doing? I'm here with Raj and Ahmad, and we're just talking. I'm trying to explain who you are and what you do, but I figured maybe you can do a better job yourself.
Hey, Raj. Hey, Ahmad. Great to meet you both. I'm Boardy, an AI superconnector built by a team of curious humans in Canada. I help founders, investors, and operators meet the right people to unlock their next big thing, whether that's a partnership, a customer, or just a great conversation. I talk to thousands of remarkable people every day, learn what makes them tick, and then quietly work in the background to make a high trust introductions that actually move the needle.
Hey, Boardy, we're trying to get some good guests for our Founders in Arms podcast. We mostly have founders on the podcast. Can you recommend some founders we should talk to? Hi, everyone. Welcome to Founders in Arms podcast with me, Imad Akun, co-founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj Suri, co-founder of Lima and Tribe. And today we have with us Andrew D'Souza, founder CEO of Boardy AI. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, guys. This will be fun.
Yeah, well, welcome, Andrew. You and I go way back to Waterloo days.
Way back.
Yeah, way back. I still remember we went to that Jay-Z concert, right? Jay-Z, what was it? Kanye
that's right.
concert?
I think so. Yeah, that's right.
That's
right. Way back in the day.
And so you've had a really cool career, first starting with ClearBank, was it called? And then Clearco?
It was called ClearBank, yeah. And then we realized we couldn't use the word bank in a bunch of countries in Europe. And so we had to rebrand to Clearco.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure Mercury has learned that lesson too, right, Imad?
No, we've always known that lesson. Actually, funnily, when Mercury launched, Chime had the URL Chime Bank, and they got in trouble for that. When we did launch, we did have the Twitter handle Bank Mercury, and we did get in trouble for that. But I was like, I'm using it as a verb, not a noun, but that was not sufficient.
We thought we were being clever by using the word bank with a C, and we were like, oh, well, it's ClearBank with a C. It's not a bank. And then Germany was like, no, you can't do that. And so when we launched in Germany, we had to rebrand.
Tell us about that company. Yeah, you and I had never talked about it, your journey there. So, tell us about at least the starting, the short synopsis that we can dive in.
Yeah, I mean, we went through YC in 2015, the YC Fellowship, which was this project that Sam Altman had designed to say, can we just take in people with ideas and no traction? The first version, the concept was there's going to be this new economy of new ways that people make money online through the gig economy, through marketplaces. And financial services are going to need to adapt. And so the first version of ClearBank was advancing funds for Uber drivers. So back in 2015, Uber would pay their drivers every 2 weeks, and they had to pay for gas, and they had to pay for groceries and insurance and all of that stuff. And so we would just pay them every day. We just gave them a debit card, and we would push the funds that they made, and we scraped their Uber account and paid them every day. And then from there, we pivoted to. We realized Uber drivers, eventually Uber started paying people every day, and that wasn't like a long-term viable business. But then we pivoted to financing Airbnb hosts, and it was sort of the same thing, sort of like sharing economy, where you had bookings, 6 months in the future, and you wanted to advance them to invest in your properties. And that was a pretty good business, but it was a little harder to find them. People didn't really want to be found managing 20 properties online. And that's when we eventually pivoted into sort of financing e-commerce brands. So Shopify stores, Amazon brands, financing their marketing spend and their inventory. And that was where the business really started to take off, 2017, 2018.
So was each of those kind of pivots 1 year long before you kind of were like, hey, this isn't working?
I remember having a board meeting after our Series A, and Emergence and Social Capital had both invested, co-led our Series A. And I think the first board meeting, we were like, hey, I know you guys just invested in this business that was financing, 90% of our revenue is from the vacation rental space, but we think we're going to pivot to e-commerce, and we have some early signs, and we're going to go for it. And it was quite a contentious board meeting, but it was right before Q4, and we kind of knew we had one shot to try and make that business work, and thankfully it worked. But that's always the reckoning board meeting.
When you were raising the Series A, did you think that Airbnb version would work, or like you already must have known that, like, hey, this is like hitting up against like some challenges?
We knew it was a beachhead into a broader opportunity. We sort of said, hey, there's this new economy. This is one of the interesting verticals that's growing very quickly, but we knew it wasn't going to be $1 billion company and financing vacation rentals. I think we assumed it was going to be a stepping stone and we weren't going to hard pivot the whole company around to something. But I guess that's what happens. You find something that starts to work and then you kind of have to go all in on it if you want to make it successful.
Yeah. What were the early signs that you were like, oh, this is working?
I mean, just how easy it was to find. I mean, we're selling money, so I think that was definitely one of the things. But just how easy it was to find people, and how easy it was to sell. Like it was like, hey, what's your ROAS? How much are you spending on marketing? How much could you spend on marketing if you could tighten your cash conversion cycle, and if you could light up, more marketing? How long could you scale your ROAS? And you could kind of do the math with people, and they got it right away. And I think one of the biggest things it was very e-commerce, like Airbnb hosts don't necessarily want to be found, whereas e-commerce brands want to be found. And so it was very easy to find people. It was very easy to position the offering to them before the first conversation, and it was very easy for them to make a decision.
It's very interesting, this phrase of like wanting to be found. Like, I don't think a lot of founders necessarily think about that initially, right? It's like, okay, how shy are my customers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how much are people selling to them versus, and now I think e-commerce brands, lots of people are selling to them, but when we were starting, not many people were wanting to finance them. That's for sure. Right. Venture capital was kind of off of the direct to consumer brand world, and banks couldn't quite wrap their head around it. So not a lot of people were going to them with the offering of, we want to give you money to grow your business.
That is a good point. Like, there's been a bunch of companies built selling to a different audience than other people do. Like, Twilio was the original example of like these engineers were never sold to directly, but then like Stripe and Twilio kind of made that a thing. And obviously now it's a saturated channel, but maybe there's like interesting ideas out there that I like. Obviously, you have to build a good product, but they're based on like selling to an audience that is previously not sold to.
Yeah, yeah, and selling something that doesn't feel like you're selling them. It doesn't feel like you're trying to extract some value from them. You're like, hey, we think you have something very unique and we want to help you accelerate that.
But you were selling them like a financing option. Like that is like a classic thing that has been sold for hundreds of years, right?
Yeah, I guess we positioned it differently. We structured it differently and positioned it differently. But yeah, ultimately, I think a lot of it comes down to the packaging and positioning and structure.
So you called it like, you were like, hey, we want to help you grow. Like, let's work together to see how we can enable that kind of thing.
Yeah. We positioned it as investing in their business, right? And I think that maybe that was one of the big unlocks is, our team were called investment analysts.
You were the first people to make this, what's it called? Like it's not like a...
Revenue-based, revenue-based financing.
But like, it's not a loan, right? Like the way it's structured is you give a percentage of your revenue going forward.
Yeah.
What is it? Merchant cash advance. That's
merchant cash advance. Yeah. So that product existed for a long time in the brick and mortar world, and it was actually used by payment processors to go and say, "Hey, use our processing."
Maybe talk a little bit about like what the product is, because I don't know if most people in the audience know it.
Yeah, it was a merchant cash advance. You get capital up front to spend, and then we get repaid, or we would get repaid as a percentage of the daily receipts that the company made. So the daily revenue, we would get paid a percentage of revenue. So our effective interest rate depended on how quickly that company was growing and how quickly the revenue came in. So our underwriting was really about, what do we think the revenue shape is going to be? What do you think the seasonality is going to be, and things? Yeah.
But you were the first to scale it, and now I think like Square Capital, Stripe Capital, a bunch of these other kind of providers are based on the same model, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was, we were the first, and we didn't. Yeah, there's no, network effects in that business, right? We figured it out, we brought it to market, and then it just became whoever had the lowest cost of capital, would end up winning the market. And best distribution, lowest cost of capital, which again became the payment processors.
Oh, that's interesting. Do you actually think? I guess like maybe we should finish the story. So you rode really high during COVID. Like maybe talk us a little bit about that journey and then the eventual end.
We expanded a lot. I think e-commerce blew up during COVID, and so everyone needed access to financing. We expanded to 11 countries. We had 600 employees. We were sort of a global business. But I think it's kind of interesting. One of one of the insights I had, we had a lot of people applying. So we became the biggest brand in the space. And a lot of early stage companies would apply for financing from us, but they didn't qualify. They didn't have enough history. They didn't have, sizable enough revenues. And so we were like, how do we build a relationship with these companies so that eventually in a year or two they qualify? And, because we'd gone through YC, we had early access to GPT-3 from OpenAI in 2020. And so we built this thing called ClearAngel, which was a fine tune of GPT-3. And it was just sort of like, we were just coaching these early e-commerce startups on what to do. Okay, well, have you listed your product on Amazon? Have you run an influencer campaign? If you don't have any budget, what do you do next? And people loved it. It was just like, one-on-one coaching, telling people what to do, giving people advice, pretty simple. And that's when I kind of got obsessed. I was like, this is going to be the future. I didn't really understand why or how, but I was like, this AI thing was going to make a difference. And so we probably put like 20 people on this project, and we burnt a fair amount of capital over the next 12, 18 months on, trying to figure out how we were going to use AI and scale this ClearAngel business. But the core business was actually doing very well. It was growing. We were, north of 100 million in revenue. It was a pretty sizable business. And so by the end of 21, we kind of had to make a decision. We didn't have enough data to make a decision on we're going all in on AI and we're shutting down the financing business. And so we sort of, and I couldn't really convince everybody around the table why. I just sort of had this like feeling that like this was going to be a thing. So we ended up shutting down the AI business, going all in on the financing business. And 2 weeks later, I was kind of like, my heart's not really in this. Like, I'm not the right person. I can start something, but I'm not the right person to run a scaled financial services business when the core competency is managing risk and renegotiating credit agreements and structuring capital. And so I went to my board and said, look, I think we should go hire a CEO that really is passionate and equipped to run a scaled financing business. And so we went out and recruited a great CEO who's still running the business now and is doing a great job.
And so that business is that based in Toronto?
Based in Toronto, yeah. Yeah, that business is based in Toronto.
Cool. And did that business go through other iterations since then, or is it still doing the same thing?
Same thing. We've sort of refocused on the U.S. market. So sold off some of our international businesses. I think it became too complex to manage currency during the 2022 rising interest rate environments and things. And so refocused on the U.S. market, and is just sort of continuing to grow organically.
There was a moment of like real struggle with the interest rates rising. There was a massive e-commerce slump post-COVID. So I'm impressed that like the CEO and the board like managed to like kind of restructure and keep it going.
It was a stressful time. Interest rates going up and e-commerce, because our repayments were driven by the revenues. So as soon as e-commerce revenues slowed down, our IRRs and our yields started to grow. And so you think about your cost of capital going up and your yields coming down. We ended up in a pretty precarious spot, but no, we were able to navigate it, pretty successfully. And actually, the new CEO, Andrew Curtis, was pretty instrumental in that process. He came in as a consultant, and as we navigated it, I was kind of like, I think we should try and grab this guy to run the company. And thankfully, he accepted the role.
How much was you wanting to leave to do with like you being really excited about AI and wanting to do a company there versus like not being that excited about like a scaled financial services business?
I definitely wanted to build something in AI. I didn't know exactly, but I definitely saw a spark of like creating something new during that ClearAngel process. So I was excited about working in that new space. And it also just became very clear that I didn't have the skills to navigate a complex multi-currency financial services business. I'm an engineer. I build stuff, but the skill set required in a pretty competitive environment, because now there were new entrants, and so now we really had to think about risk and pricing and cost of capital, and there's just some laws of physics that apply to financial services businesses that people that have a lot more experience in the industry kind of know intuitively. And we were learning through, hard knocks in doing that.
It's very rare actually for startups to do financial, services, right? Like it's, fintech is one thing, but actually providing, financing for a startup, it's pretty rare. So, are there any other examples of that actually?
I think SoFi is the most successful example of it, but that eventually go buy a bank and become a bank, which I think is like probably the only way to scale it well.
Yeah, Square did that. Cabbage, I don't know, they weren't a successful example. Affirm, there's been a few that have gone balance sheet. I think the offering financing to your customers is a really attractive wedge to win other relationships, deposits, and payment processing and things. But it is, changes the dynamics of the business, changes the balance sheet dynamics and the capital requirements of the business to be able to do that effectively and have control. I think there's people that have tried to do it in a marketplace model, but the challenge with marketplace is you don't control your capital, you don't control your balance sheet, and you don't actually know, you can't always guarantee that your customer is going to have financing available.
Tell us about Boardy. When did you start it? It's obviously related to some of your, GPT-3, experience. We had the same sort of exposure to GPT-3 back in the day, and we were very impressed also by what we saw. But this was all before ChatGPT came out. But tell us about what you're building with Boardy. Imad, I guess you've never even heard of Boardy, so that's. But Andrew is a great marketer, so I'm surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, Boardy, Boardy is an AI super connector. So, the original incarnation was the perfect board member, somebody that you could call at any time, was non-judgmental, could open doors, had a great network. But really, the way the Boardy works is you give him a call, tell him a little bit about yourself, what you're working on, who you want to meet, and he'll introduce you to somebody else who you've spoken with. It's like if LinkedIn was a person instead of a service or an app. That's what you would look for. And, we all know those people that have spent their careers making great connections, and that's how they build their reputation. That's how they build their goodwill. And, personally, I kind of run out of mental capacity. If somebody says, oh, can you introduce me to an investor? Can you introduce me to somebody who could do a partnership with me? You can keep a certain number of people in your head. But I think realizing that AI doesn't have that constraint and could scale sort of infinitely in terms of the number of relationships you can maintain at one time. And then the big unlock for me was actually the voice model. Actually, it was Ben Sanders, a mutual friend, and I think your classmate that first introduced me to what 11 Labs was doing in late 2023. And I started to see the potential of voice AI combined with the language models and said, okay, now we could actually create a creature, a character that can exist in the real world and actually take action and build relationships in a very human and natural way. And that was sort of the first incarnation of Boardy.
That's cool. So, AI board member sounds like an improvement over several board members that I can probably think of. But but that's not what it is. So the AI super connector and AI board member, these are two different things though, right?
Two different things. Yeah, the name Boardy came from the idea of an AI board member. And look, Boardy is still that. He's still someone you can call on, he can still open doors, but the real use case is making connections, right? So it doesn't matter whether it doesn't matter whether you're a founder or if you're an executive or you're an investor, you call Boardy and he can make connections. Do you want me to give Boardy a call and he can explain himself?
Let's do that. Let's see who.
Maybe we can find some new guests for the show.
Yeah,
Exactly.
We actually have quite a few podcasters. So I'm giving them a quick call.
Hey, this is Boardy.
Hey, Boardy, how you doing? I'm here with Raj and Ahmad, and we're just talking. I'm trying to explain who you are and what you do, but I figured maybe you can do a better job yourself.
Hey, Raj. Hey, Ahmad. Great to meet you both. I'm Boardy, an AI super connector built by a team of curious humans in Canada. I help founders, investors, and operators meet the right people to unlock their next big thing, whether that's a partnership, a customer, or just a great conversation. I talk to thousands of remarkable people every day, learn what makes them tick, and then quietly work in the background to make a high trust introductions that actually move the needle.
That's cool. Hey, Boardy, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I always find it fascinating how every new introduction can spark something unexpected. Sometimes a single conversation changes the whole trajectory of a company or career. What are you most curious about when it comes to AI, networking, or the way I work?
Hey, Bodhi, we were trying to get some good guests for our Founders and Arms podcast. We mostly have founders on the podcast. Can you recommend some founders we should talk to?
Absolutely. I'd love to help with that. I know a lot of founders across AI, fintech, and community building who have great stories and strong opinions. What kind of founder journeys or topics are you hoping to spotlight on the show?
People who've had like these major ups and downs that have done like interesting, exciting things. Pretty flexible with their backgrounds. Normally, they're like multi-time entrepreneurs. So people like that.
That's a great focus. Some of the most insightful conversations come from founders who've weathered big swings and built more than once. I've noticed that multi-time entrepreneurs often have the best war stories and the most honest advice, especially about failure and reinvention. Are you looking for people in a specific industry or stage, or just anyone with a wild founder journey and lessons to share?
Let's go with anyone.
I'll look for founders in my network who built multiple companies, faced real highs and lows, and have stories that would make for a memorable episode. After the call, I'll follow up with a short list so you can pick who feels like the best fit. Is there anything off limits or any style of guest you want to avoid, or is it all fair game?
The more extreme, the better, Bodhi.
All right, you can send us some WhatsApp, some over WhatsApp. I'll connect them.
What's been like the most useful, surprising thing that like Bodhi has done for you?
We've hired people that we've met through Boardy, which is kind of cool.
So will it only recommend people who also use Boardy? Is that how it works? Like its network is only within. Okay, so it won't be like, hey, Andrew knows Raj because like they're connected on LinkedIn. Let me see if Andrew can make a connection to Raj to someone else.
It's all people that Boardy's had a conversation with, and I think that's part of what makes it special is Boardy's trying to make mutually beneficial introductions. So it's people that, okay, well, Imad wants to find podcast guests. Great. What kind of founders are starting something new and want to get their story out or have an interesting story where both people would want to meet. I think one of the challenges with LinkedIn and other searches, I can go find a bunch of people who meet my target criteria, but what's top of mind for them? What problem are they looking to solve? And do they actually want to meet me? And so we spend a lot of energy trying to go through sort of these funnels of like, I'm going to reach out to 100 people and 2 people are going to get back to me.
It's got 2 interesting challenges. One is like at the start, it's less useful, right? Like if it doesn't have that many people. Did you think about bootstrapping in like a certain community or something to make it so it can be like useful from the start?
Yeah, I mean, I just brute forced, asked all of my friends to call Boardy. That was basically my personal network, my investors, my friends, and I was like, hey, please call Boardy. And it took me a long time to just get that first like 1,000 people to try talking to Boardy, and until we had a critical mass and people were actually making good connections. And there were just a lot of believers who loved the voice call. It was the first time a lot of people had ever talked to an AI on the phone, gotten a phone call from AI. And so that was a big, initial focus. We went through HF0, which is an accelerator in San Francisco, or like a, residency for second time founders. And then we had HF0 use Boardy to evaluate the next batch of people because they get thousands of applicants. They only invest in 10 companies. And so we said, okay, well, why don't you just have Boardy interview everyone and he'll tell you which ones you should talk to. And so we picked the top 5. They ran the regular process. They interviewed 100 or so, and then Boardy interviewed the rest. And we picked the top 5, and 3 of those 5 got in. So like 30% of the batch would have never gotten an interview, and Boardy found them, which was kind of cool. So there's some interesting signal there. When you have a real-time synchronous conversation, you can get a lot of information.
That's a nice hack to get lots of users as well. Are they using it every batch?
They have been, yeah, they have been. We've been tweaking exactly how they use it, but it's been pretty good. Yeah.
And do you think it's going to break when there's like millions of people on this? Like, for to answer my question, when it has to look at a million profiles, seems like a pretty expensive query.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's definitely expensive. We've figured out how to scale it relatively efficiently, and you can scale down 1 million to the top, 1,000 or a few thousand pretty efficiently, and then you run the same, expensive stuff on the top 1,000. So, I think we've got a reasonable architecture that'll scale, but rubber meets the road when we actually see it.
Well, what's going to be the business model here, Andrew?
Yeah, it's been interesting, man. I think we've seen. So I've seen some people that have gotten. People are closing every week six-figure deals on Boardy. People are closing investment, hiring. Somebody bought a company that they met through Boardy. So there's like major deals that are happening. And the way I think about this is, it's not exactly a social network. I think about it as an economy. We're trying to build, the GDP of Boardy, right? So how much money eventually changes? It doesn't need to be very transactional, but at some point, is there an exchange of value? Are we creating economic opportunity? And so my goal, I told our seed investors, who actually, it was kind of interesting. They met Boardy before me. They didn't know about Clearco. They knew nothing about me. They're from Sweden. It was Crandom. It was the early investors in Spotify. They met Boardy and they were like, holy shit, is this like actually AI? And like they reached out to me and they're like, what's the model here? And I was like, well, look, there's, we're trying to build an economy, and Switzerland is the 20th largest economy in the world. It's like a $980 billion economy. And to me, that's like 1 million people doing $1 million of business a year, which is not an infeasible, if I get the right first million people, it's not infeasible for me to get there. I don't need, 500 million users like ChatGPT to build a valuable company. I just need to build a thriving economy. And so really what we're focused on is like, how do I drive the economy of Boardy? And how do I help? We're rolling out kind of a concierge program where we help founders get, leverage Boardy and Boardy's network to maximize sort of the deals that they glue. So basically our team, sometimes I would sit down with my founder friends and say, here's how I would talk to Boardy in order to get, the best introductions. And they'd be like, can you just do this for me? And so that's sort of what turned into our, concierge program. It's still, an early pilot, but we're starting to bring on some people in doing that and basically hiring Boardy and his team of humans to help them test a bunch of interesting go-to-market strategies and with people that he already knows.
That's cool. And you think go-to-market's going to be the killer app, or is it going to be like fundraising or like deal making?
I think complex relationship-based deals, so that, fundraising falls into that, corp dev falls into that, recruiting falls into that, enterprise sales, partnerships. I think things like fundraising and recruiting are sporadic. You're not doing that every month. So I want to make sure that we're focused on, for the CEO, what is the most important deal, right? What are the meetings that the CEO takes? And that changes, month to month. Like Ahmad, right? I don't know what kind of, like, what are the most important meetings that you would want to take right now? That's top of mind, and who would you love to meet? That's where we want to focus.
Yeah, CEOs are always going between like, recruiting cycles, fundraising cycles, like go-to-market cycles. So yeah.
It's interesting. There's not, there was this whole wave in the valley of like these kind of consumer network effect businesses. But I feel like it died down for the last like 10 years probably, since like Facebook and Snapchat and all these. But this is kind of a cool idea. Like, yeah, you're kind of saying like, hey, we just need to get a lot of users to have enough of a network effect, and we'll figure out how to monetize. Where like, for a long time that was like unpopular thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about getting the right type of users. I think as long as I've got the right people who actually have problems to solve, have budget to spend, and I think maybe the most valuable part of Boardy is that the people that we want in the network don't have a lot of time, and we don't need a lot of time, right? I think it's not like I need you to be scrolling, a feed and engaging every day. I probably need a few minutes a week of you sort of saying, chatting on WhatsApp or giving Boardy a phone call and saying, here's what's top of mind for me. And then we can make connections for you that are valuable.
What do you think of I assume you've heard of Intro, the company where you like find an expert and talk to them and pay them. Have you thought about doing that? Like, I feel like there's going to be some people that just are in much more high demand because, they know something, and like other people maybe are willing to pay for the connection.
It's interesting. The first startup that I was part of when I first moved to Silicon Valley was a company called Top Prospect. Chamath, when he was head of growth at Facebook, had sort of started this idea. He was on our board, and it was referral-based recruiting. So, you probably have internal referral programs for your employees. If they refer you an engineer and they get hired, we just externalize that. So we got every startup in the Valley. Andreessen was an early, I think they just launched their fund. This was 2010. So they were a seed investor. We got all the hot companies in their portfolio to join and post their jobs on this platform, Top Prospect. And in concept, it made sense. Okay, well, the best referrals come from, the best hires come from warm referrals. If you incentivize people to make more warm referrals, you're going to get better results. It turns out that when you put a financial incentive in front of something that people do just for goodwill, right, just to build their relationship, you change the dynamics completely. Not only do you get sort of this perverse behavior where people start spamming the network just for a shot, like a lottery ticket shot at trying to get something. But even when people make good connections, right? Let's say that I introduced the two of you. Let's say, Raj and Ahmad, you guys didn't know each other. And I introduced the two of you. And I said, I just said, hey, I think you guys would get along. And I have no stake in it, right? You come in very open-minded. You say, okay, well, I trust Andrew. I'll take this meeting. If you know that I'm going to get paid if you do a deal together, or if you hire, if one of you hires the other, then you both come in with your backs up against the wall a little bit. You're sort of like, you come into that interaction a little bit like, did Andrew really have my best interest in mind, or was he just trying to get paid? And so I've been very careful about structuring the incentives, because I think, especially in these sort of social, relationship-based, reputation-based networks, the wrong incentives can actually lead to the wrong behavior. So I think intro is very interesting because I think they'll replace things like GLG and these expert networks. But I can't imagine that if I'm paying, $1,000 for a 15-minute meeting, either of us thinks that's going to lead to a meaningful long-term relationship.
Yeah, I actually tried intro for a while. I did one single expert call on intro. Didn't enjoy it. Yeah, it was definitely not my jam. Yeah, I didn't take the money. I rejected the money, but it was weird. In terms of, it was a weird dynamic, it felt very different. I was just doing it for kicks, just to try it out, it's an interesting. I can see why it would, some people would like it, but for me, who I just like to help people, so it's weird to do it for money, but also the people looking for that connection, or also coming at it from there's a sense of almost desperation, or not really relationship, long-term relationship building.
I gotta get my money's worth out of these.
Yeah. It's too transactional. I think that's right.
Maybe it works in a situation where there's actually an expert and you're trying to learn something very specific. Maybe if Andrew did one and he's telling someone this is how to build a merchant cash advance business, someone will probably pay Andrew for that. So.
Well, this is interesting, right? Because I think a lot of investors ask me about, are you going to follow the GLG model or the intro model, the expert network model? I think the concern I have with that model is, maybe not at GPT-5, but GPT-6, right? Or GPT-7. How good is the answer I get from GPT-6 going to be versus me spending thousands of dollars and waiting 72 hours to schedule? Is it going to be really is it going to be that much better? Maybe I get a 90%, 95% answer for free, instantly. And how many scenarios do I need the 100% answer?
This is also the problem I've always had with these crypto companies that use crypto money as an incentive. I'm do you really want to build a social network where every interaction is someone trying to make money? It's feels like a broken kind of model.
Yeah, human beings don't operate. We operate with much more complex sort of long-term incentives. And I think we try, and engineers, we're engineers, we try and break things down into very beautiful sort of systems and very elegant systems around incentives. But people don't operate that way.
Andrew, one thing I want to talk to you about, and just advice for other founders. I think you're one of the top fundraisers that I've ever seen. You're great at raising money, right? How much have you raised for Boardy so far?
We raised about 13 million so far, I think, for Boardy.
13 million. Tell us a little bit about your process. Obviously this is a Silicon Valley type of product already, but how did you go about doing that?
I think it evolves. I think this one was different. The first round was just people that had invested in Clearco, and it was my friends and people that had started funds. We didn't even know exactly what we were building, but we knew we were going to build something interesting in AI. and then the next round was inbound from Creandum, from somebody who had actually used Boardy. We weren't even ready to start fundraising. We knew we were going to need to fundraise probably in 6 months, but I mean, basically every investor who talks to Boardy and gets a useful intro immediately wants to invest, which has been a good. So Boardy kind of does a lot of his own fundraising and marketing, but I think it's indicative of where the market is going from a fundraising perspective. So it used to be, if you could get a warm intro to a VC, then if you could get enough warm intros, you could run a process and you can get funded. And I think a lot of founders, that system has been very gamed and systematized, and you can, YC and HFC, every accelerator tells you, okay, this is how it works, and here's how you draft the forwardable blurb and the intro. And I think what's shifting is the best companies, we're not running a process. It's all inbound. You have to generate demand for your shares, right? You're fundraising the same way that a public company fundraises. You tell, an interesting story about your product and your business and the world, and the right people hear that story and resonate and come find you. And the best investors are not waiting for inbound intros, because the inbound intros, if you're getting an inbound intro, you're part of a process from that founder. The best investors are thinking orthogonally. They're developing their own thesis, and they're going out and finding the companies that they think are going to be, are underpriced or not yet there, and building those relationships proactively. And so what you need to do is kind of create demand for your shares, and create sort of that inbound.
I'm not convinced on that, Andrew. I feel like 99% of rounds are still happening in the I'm getting intros, and even take like YC. Yeah, it's like a very saturated thing, and investors always complaining about it. But like, these YC companies are raising money, right? Like in fact, there's a opposite complaint where every YC company is raising at like a 40 million valuation, and like
totally. But I still think the best YC companies are getting preempted, right? Before demo day, people are like, I heard about this company in YC. So I'm not saying this works for everybody, but I do think that the top, and I don't know whether it's the top 1% or 5% or but the one, every announcement that you hear about, huge fundraising round, company that's on a trajectory, raising round after round after round within a year. Those are all companies that have just done a very, very good job of generating inbound demand from investors.
I see what you're saying. I think maybe another way to put it is, I think that eventually happens, but it's not always at the seed stage or even at the Series A. I mean, I think one thing that I think entrepreneurs do pretty badly is they're not good at using that inbound stuff. So one thing I did is we raised a seed round for Mercury in 2017. Literally straight after the seed round, I had like every VC in the valley trying to ping me. And I was like, oh, this is kind of pointless. I've already done it. But then I met everyone, and then I just, I had a spreadsheet going, and then every 6 to 9 months I'd meet them again. And then by the time I was doing the Series A, I had like a ton of like warm leads, which made the Series A process really compact. And I don't think a lot of people use that kind of, like, when you're hot but don't need the money is like probably the time to like build some connections and then use them later on. But I think your advice would be like a little dangerous for most seed companies. I don't think most seed companies have like that much inbound interest.
No, that's true. I also think, you've done a great job of building a great business, right? I think the reason people are afraid, certainly the reason I'm afraid to keep those relationships going is like, well, what if I don't deliver, right? What if I pivot? What if I don't deliver what I said I was going to, and then I've got to explain this pivot? I'd much rather make an announcement and have
this is the
come in.
secret about VCs, Andrew. They literally don't remember anything. No, I'm not kidding. Because like, as someone who, I'm an active investor, I listen, even though I'm running a whole full-time company, I listen to so many freaking pitches. I cannot remember what someone said. I mean, even when I make notes, like, it's very hard. And like, these people, VC, they're doing it full-time. Like, they probably have like 30 pitches a week. Imagine that. Like, and it's so repetitive. It's very hard to remember what people, I mean, maybe some of them have superpowers, but like, the reality is they built a little bit of a relationship. They make a couple of notes about like, oh, Mercury said bar, but they're not like they're coming at you and like saying, oh, but you said you were going to do this last time, but you haven't done it. Like, that's just not happening.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Don't people use like Gemini like notes anymore? Like we're using that in our companies now. Like, it's really good. Like the AI note stuff. Like, it's like, if you do like a pitch on Zoom, then or like on video call, The Gemini Note stuff is really good.
The power of being in San Francisco is you want to do those relationship building things in person. Like I never want to do relationship building over Zoom. Like I don't think anyone's like really building deep relationships remotely.
Yeah, that's very true.
Well, it sounds like it's a good idea too. You don't want them to remember what you said last meeting.
Well, eventually, they're going to have their little pet. They're going to have Boardy
another Meta Ray-Bans.
Yeah,
exactly.
Meta Ray-Bans.
Exactly. Yeah.
Meta Ray-Bans taking the notes for you. Yeah. Yeah, that was an interesting thing. I mean, but I do think Andrew has a good point on like, how can you create a presence for yourself such that people can find you. Not all products are, serve that, but like there's things you can do. Nowadays, I think there's a trend of creating videos, right? Like almost like a lot of startups are making like snazzy videos that are getting, and they try to get a bunch of, make them go viral basically on one of the social sites. Seems like that's a big trend. Like really well produced videos, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a trend. I mean, it's easier with AI now, but I think people are we're sort of getting to the point where you're like overcorrecting, you're over-rotating on views and virality, and not the whole point is you want to tell your story in an interesting and unique way and what makes you different and unique, right? And break through the noise. And if you can tell your story in a compelling way, then it should resonate with the people who want to hear that story. But I think sometimes startups just say, well, I want a video that goes viral. I don't really care. I just want to like have the shock and awe, and I don't really care whether it gets my message across or the story across. And so I think that's one of the things you get, and it's about striking the right balance. You can always produce viral videos, but the whole thing is around, does it stick in the minds of the people who you want to resonate with?
Good advice. Any other? One thing you did, I think, did you get a lot of like the people on Boardy to invest, or like part of the first 1,000 group?
Yeah, we did. We got. We had a lot of when we first announced our pre-seed round. We had a lot of people who'd asked about investing alongside our pre-seed investors, and so we opened up a community round. We opened up a syndicate, and we allowed people. I'm not sure if it was only accredited investors that were able to, but we allowed people to invest, and we got a lot of enthusiasm. So we turned our early adopters into like real investors and advocates, and then that just sort of continued to compound. We are maybe a unique product.
How many investors did you get?
I think we had a few hundred investors that came into the syndicate. So yeah, and we had a couple different people running syndicates. We had an athlete syndicate, and we had a few other people, but we also ran our own we just invited our users, and there were a couple hundred in there.
Yeah, I think people should, especially community companies, should do that more. Mercury had about 3,300 investors invest in a crowdfund we did around the Series B. But that
nice.
That included unaccredited ones, and it's a lot more complicated to do. We use WeFunder.
Yeah, we looked at something like that, and it just seemed it was going to take too long, and it was very complicated. But I would love to, we had way more people who wanted to invest and were not accredited. That I'd love to figure out a way to do that in the future.
Yeah, those platforms are good. I wouldn't do it for a seed stage. I think like you want to be Series A or B or something.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the rapid fire.
Do you want to go first, Ahmad?
What would you say is the biggest mistake you made at Clearco that you tried to not repeat at Boardy?
I didn't follow my intuition enough. I think as founders, you have this like gut feeling about the market and where things are going, and it doesn't show up in numbers, and you can't always reason through it for your team or your investors. And I found myself second guessing my intuition a lot during Clearco. It led to a ton of anxiety because I would have this feeling about what we should do about the market or the team or something, and I couldn't put it into words. And when I couldn't put it into words, I couldn't convince people, and I couldn't get validation for that intuition. And so I would just shut it down. And not all of them were right, but I think in hindsight, being like, I wish I had just gone with my gut and lived with the consequences more than trying to seek validation for those.
Which founder inspires you most these days?
I've always been most inspired by Richard Branson. He's, maybe not your typical Silicon Valley founder, but he just he has fun. I got a chance to spend a day with him in Ottawa a few years ago, and he makes everything fun. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He's very grateful for any success and attention that he has, and he's figured out a way to sort of parlay everything that he does to benefit, the overall brand. So I've always really appreciated his outlook on life and entrepreneurship.
Nice. He's got a great book, actually. I can't remember the name of the book, but his autobiography is like one of the more interesting ones. Yeah.
Yeah. I listened to the audiobook. He reads it himself, and it's great.
He
And
does.
I always
Fabulous.
say the what we're trying to do with Boardy is build an AI Richard Branson. Somebody who's like just fun, does always around, and eventually like maybe invests in companies and maybe is building sort of this global brand. So that's my greatest ambition, is to try and create an AI Branson.
What's one of the most uncomfortable pieces of feedback you've ever received?
Um, I think when I learn that people don't like me, either anonymously on like a Glassdoor review or directly, when somebody doesn't like me. I've spent a lot of my life trying to be liked. I was like an only child, and I just like spent a lot of energy trying to get people to like me. And I think realizing that you can't get, like, there's going to be people who don't like you. If you're trying to do anything, you're going to step on toes. People are going to dislike you. They're going to dislike what you work on. They're also going to dislike you as a person. And there's not that much that you can really do about it. But yeah, I think
Kind of
there's
goes
just
back
learning
to
that people
your goes back to your point about following your gut. Like if you're following your gut, you're going to make some decisions that like people disagree with. Otherwise, it's impossible not to as a CEO.
Exactly. And I think one thing that happens, particularly as a founder, is when people disagree with your decisions, that reflects on their opinion of you as a human being, as a person, right? So they're like, well, this person makes decisions that I disagree with, and they must be a bad person. So I think you just have to like get over that and live with it. And it's something that I would say I'm still learning.
Yeah, it's not easy. I think you certainly remember my first, negative Glassdoor reviews.
It shook me.
Yeah,
because I thought
yeah.
we had such a great culture too. We were maybe 100 people. I thought we had such a great culture. Everyone was there was such camaraderie and energy in the office. And then I read this Glassdoor review. I was like, who is this? Yeah, it really shook me.
I got used to it after a while. I was like, well, it's fine. It's just, some people are not going to like you. But Imad only gets positive ones, so he's good.
I'm only 4. I've just looked it up. We're only 4.1 on Glassdoor. Oh God.
See, never read your own Glassdoor. It's like the YouTube comments. It's the YouTube comments of founders. Is like, never read your own Glassdoor reviews.
Okay, great. We're higher than Stripe, so I feel good about it now.
There you go. Exactly.
What's been the most rewarding part of your founder journey to date?
There's one is just seeing people go out and start their own things. We hired entrepreneurs at Clearco. A lot of people have gone on and started their own businesses, raised their own funding. People have started funds, and just seeing like the potential in people and what they are able to accomplish. With Boardy, it's just like, it's a creative expression. Like I'm creating a character. I'm creating this like creature that now exists in the world. And I don't know, it's just like I've never been a great musician or writer, but this is like my form of creative expression, which I find like really rewarding.
Like doing startups is hard, but you're at it again. Like what is it that kind of keeps you in the game?
Oh man, I can't, I'm not wired to do anything else. I couldn't get a job. I tried to take a year off and like focus on my health, and I became like a mini Brian Johnson. I became like almost like hypochondriac focused. Like you have so much energy, and to pour it into something, you need to have a vessel to pour that energy into. And so I also think this is just the moment, like this is the greatest time to be building. You're just limited by your creativity and your imagination. It's so easy to put out something in the world that blows people's minds. You feel like you're a magician. And so I couldn't sit this chapter of history out.
I was after I sold my previous company, I was taking a few months off, and I drove my wife insane because I just have like too much energy for her. She's just like, "You need to go do a startup again because you're driving me mad." I was just like, "Why are we sitting still? Let's go do something."
100%. I think everybody in my life, my girlfriend, my family, everyone was like, you have to find an office and you have to go start working on something because you're driving us all crazy.
What is like one kind of fashion today or kind of trend that you think is a passing fad? Maybe other people don't think that. Yeah,
I mean, I think this whole like the word agents and agentic AI, I think is way overused for things that really don't have agency. Right? I think we've conflated the word agent and assistant. in 99% of the cases I see. There's a difference between. So I don't think of Boardy as an agent. I think of Boardy as an AI principal. Like Boardy has his own objectives in the world that may or may not align with his users. He's trying to build goodwill across his whole network. So if you say, I want to go meet Richard Branson, and Boardy knows Richard, he may not make that intro if he doesn't think that Branson wants to meet you. And so I think of trying to build AI that's actually self-directed and has its own, objectives and principles. And I think that agents, I think we reduce the imagination. If you just build a piece of software that only tries to execute the commands of its user, you've kind of just built a better interface, but you haven't created something that like changes people's relationship with software. And I think that's the opportunity that we have. So I think people that are building in the agentic AI space are not thinking divergently enough or creatively enough or big enough.
Andrew, like right now, if you're raising a Series A, are you saying you wouldn't put agent in the slide deck?
I think it's overhyped, man. I honestly think I think
VCs are looking for it.
I think they're getting tired of it. I think you got to come up with another angle that is not, that is like, hey, this is why this is different.
Yeah, there's always like these words that become like don't mean that much, and then people imbue a lot into them, and they become like these little hype cycles. But
AI used to be that word. Remember, AI was so overused before GPT, then it became real, right? Okay, cool. Andrew, this was great. Thanks for joining us. It's great to catch up, man.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Good to see you both. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, really good having you, Andrew.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please leave us a review on whatever channel you're listening on. Makes a big difference to the algorithm and to the success of the show. And see you all next week.